We're going to start off cracking up. All right. Leslie, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you on our show today.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here. I've been really looking forward to talking to you, Tom. You're such an interesting guy, just a really cool guy.
It's got to be the beard.
It's the beard and the flannel. And what is this hat that is so cool? Is that like a little beret? Yes, it is.
It's the Irish bowler thing. Not bowler. I can't remember the name of it, but I'm honoring my Irish roots and keeping my head warm at the same time.
Yes.
Because I used to be all red, and then age happened, and now I'm Santa Claus.
I heard that redheads don't go gray, they go white. Is that true, I guess?
There's proof right here. There it is, right there. Yep. That's all white. I have Santa Claus beard. No hair, though. It's gone. The hair's not there.
Oh. But, he wears a hat, because he probably doesn't really have hair under there. That's my assumption.
I think it depends on which actor's playing him at the time. So we'll see.
Wait a minute. Santa's not real? I thought he was real.
No, we don't got to go there.
You're going to destroy my dreams. Come on. No, I'm just kidding.
I need Santa Claus to be real this year. So
we'll make his dreams real. Brother. Whew.
All right. So where do you find yourself in the world today, geographically?
Oh, geographically. Okay, good. Because that was like, whoa, what a question to start off with. But geographically.
No, we don't go there yet.
I live in the mountains of Utah. So we're right outside of Park City, Utah, near Salt Lake. And we've been here for probably about 6 years and absolutely love it. It's gorgeous. Beautiful.
Nice. What is it like around you? Are you in urban area? Are you in a rural area surrounded by mountains? What does it look like?
We're kind of in a more rural, but kind of turning into urban area. You know what I mean? Everything is growing. Everybody is moving here for some reason. I can't imagine why. It's not like it's beautiful or anything, but it's a beautiful mountainous small town. I live in a little town called Midway because it's midway to heaven. That's what they say. And it's also a place where they film a lot of the Hallmark movies. So a lot of the Christmas movies that you see, it's a very Christmassy town. And we even have an ice castles during the winter. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful area. Love it.
That is cool. Me and my wife, we go on Hallmark Christmas movie binging at Christmas time. We watch all the Hallmark movies. No matter how cheesy, we're just going to watch them all. And we got our favorites that we go back to. So I may have seen your town then.
You probably have at some point. It's everywhere. We have a big Christmas tree lighting celebration coming up, actually, I think next week. We've got all the things. It is just literally truly magical. The first time I came to Midway, we were actually living in Ogden, which is sort of north of Salt Lake when we first moved to Utah. And we came here because I took my two adult girls two. I have 4 kids, 3 of them girls, 1 boy. And but I took my 2 youngest to go see Santa Claus because they had this literal sleigh ride taking you to Santa's house where he and Mrs. Claus were in there. They had a fire going. They were making cookies. You got to sit on Santa's lap, and these adult children of mine sat on Santa's lap, and one of my daughters asked for emotional stability, and I don't think he knew what quite to do with her. It was funny.
Now that would be a gift. That would be a gift.
Yeah.
Our 20-year-old, he's kind of globally disabled in a lot of areas, and last year he decided for the first time that he was going to believe in Santa Claus. So we ended up taking him to a local tree farm. We live in a rural area of Michigan. And there was a Santa Claus there. And the Santa Claus, we've known that person, we've lived in the same house for 17 years, and I used to pastor at their church. And it's wow. It was it's just all of a sudden, we are into, Santa Claus is real. And at the age of 20, it all just kind of it's this is what I'm doing this year.
I need magic.
He would love the sleigh ride. That would be so much fun.
Oh, it was truly the coolest thing because you're just going through all these mountains. You have no idea where you're going. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, you see the smoke billowing out of the chimney. And, it's this cute little house that they've got all decorated, and it's so warm and cozy and beautiful and smells like cookies. Ugh, it was, if you went to the North Pole, that's what it would be, honestly.
Quintessential so cool. Santa. All right. Well, we might just have to one day take a trip out there and see it.
Well, come on.
Really cool.
Yeah. You got a place to stay. So.
All right. Well, what kind of soil did your life grow out of? Like, you're a podcaster, you're an author, you've been a radio, you've done a lot of really cool things with your life. Like, but where did it all start?
Well, I was, my dad left, I guess, when I was about 6 months old. And so my mom married a guy who was in the military. And so my stepdad is, I guess I would consider him my dad. I mean, definitely, I call him dad. And so, they were actually married twice. My mom was married quite a few times, just kind of trying to find her way as the single mom who had a pretty rough childhood. It was very difficult for her. And so she's just trying to find stability and love herself. And so I kind of, lived through a lot of pain and loss as a young woman, especially when it came to my father. And so, I think I spent a lot of my life just really wanting to connect with him in some way, but I was never really able to I mean, we would maybe go for a week or two of like being in touch and this is it and this is going to be the time, but it never worked. And it always made me sad, but I always did have my stepdad, so it was nice. But so we were kind of a military family for the most of my life because they were married twice, like I said. And during those times, I would say they were probably married all together, maybe 18 years. And so we were, all the time, every 3 to 4 years, which, a lot of people hate. They're like, oh, I couldn't do it. But for me, it was fantastic because I have ADHD. Never knew it until I was about 33. But I have ADHD. So it's like really nice for me to go, oh, good, we can move now. Like this, I'm done here. Like, let's go. And it also made me very adaptable. I grew up going to high school, like 9th through 12th grade in Okinawa, Japan. And we were only going to go for 1 year on an unaccompanied tour. And we stayed in the house of a missionary family that was on furlough. And so we went to this church there. My family, I guess when I was about 10 years old, really started the whole church thing like full speed ahead. And we ended up in a church that was not even a little, incredibly legalistic. It was an independent Baptist church. And that was in California right before we moved to Okinawa. Then we went to a more like a Southern Baptist church. So it was still pretty strict, but it wasn't, it wasn't fundamental Baptist. Like we could wear pants now and we could listen to music that wasn't, the Bill Gaither trio. So that was nice. And then I think just because of the picture of God that I had in my mind, of just being disappointed with me all the time, like you like to wear pants, you're not really somebody I care about. That's how I felt God felt about me. I liked Pink Floyd, and I knew that Pink Floyd was from the devil. So, it was like all these things that I just finally, when I went to college, just said, okay, for me, I'm just going to run. I'm not going to have anything to do with God. So I stopped going to church and, but it was always kind of in the back of my head, like, oh, I'm going to go to hell if I don't go back to church. And I was scared. And so that's kind of my journey up until college. Then I met my husband in college, and, we really, really connected as friends first, and then ended up, getting married within a year and started a family right away. It was like a whirlwind time in my life. But when our daughter was about 4 years old, she got the chicken pox, our oldest. And when she got chicken pox, somehow she ended up with the flesh-eating bacteria in her bloodstream.
Oh my.
And I thought I was going to lose her. The doctors really didn't give me much hope. And I remember a pastor coming in, not even a pastor, it was like a priest, because he had the little white thing, like the collar.
Yep.
And he was like, do you want me to pray? And I was like, I don't know. In my mind, I'm like, God is mad at me and he's going to take my child away because I stopped going to church. So I was scared, and I just said, can I just have some time alone? And so in that moment, I just said, all right, I get it. God, I get it. You're going to take my child away from me because I've disappointed you. But if you would just please let me keep her, I will dedicate her to you. And somehow she survived. And I will tell you, there were kids all over the area that we lived who were dying from this. It was it was bad. It either attacks your brain, your heart, or your lung. And because it attacked her right lung, her left lung kept her alive, and they put a chest tube in her right lung, and they were able to save her with some really heavy, antibiotics. So then I started taking her to church. I was like, okay, well, God let me keep her, so He must really want her. I made this deal with God, so I'm going to live up to it, right? And just kind of watching her in church and seeing her grow. We didn't really go for a while. But when she was in about middle school, we started going back to church. And it was right after 9/11. And I think Rod and I were just like, we need our kids in church. I don't know why we both felt that. But it was a lot of fear, a lot of, is this the end of the world? Is the rapture coming? And all that anxiety sort of came back. And I was like, I need to just make this right so that I'm not scared, and started going to church. But the fear didn't go away. The fear, we surrendered our lives to Jesus February of 2003, and stopped drinking. We stopped drinking for, 14 or 15 years. We just were like, well, we're Christians now. We can't do that. And, I started being kind of nuts, wouldn't let my kids watch anything like from Disney Channel that had a witch in it. I was, you can't go to the Renaissance Festival, no dressing up for Halloween. I was afraid of everything. So I was trying to protect my family. And in that process, I think I kind of freaked him out, So my oldest daughter, though, was still living her life pretty fully surrendered to this whole church thing. And watching her was just really inspiring for me because it was so different than what I grew up with. It was like a genuine love for Jesus and not a fear. So she was kind of my example for a long time. So I just keep talking. I'm so sorry.
I'm listening. I'm listening.
Yeah, I know you are, but I'm like, do you have any questions up to this point?
Well, yeah, actually, one just popped in my head of kind of like you hyper-focused on that fear. You hyper-focused on, we got to stay safe because there's all these dangers and things out there. Do you think that was maybe like the ADHD, how your brain operated, trying to like hyper-fixate?
Oh, yeah.
Do you think that was a product of that?
Oh, 100%. But I also think it was a product of my indoctrination, because even though, the Bible says there's no fear in perfect love, and perfect love casts out fear, and fear has to do with punishment. The gospel that I was raised on was all about getting out of hell. And, and Satan was this real thing, this being that was trying to pry me away from the hands of God. And it was up to me whether or not he actually would. And, even though you're told you're safe from hell when you become a Christian and say the prayer, all of a sudden, then now they're like, yeah, but Satan has his sights on you because you're hurting his chances of bringing people to hell with him, And so even though you're like, I'm safe when I die, you're like, I'm not safe now because he's always after me. All the platitudes that you hear, you must be doing something right when you get the devil all uptight, and like, so when your life was all like falling apart, people were like, oh, you must be really just so powerful in God's kingdom, So there was so much fear baked in. And I don't know how I didn't see that at the time. But fear of my kids going to hell, fear of my husband going to hell, fear of the rapture coming, And what if, I remember in 2008, I actually made a video. Oh, I can't even believe I did this. I made a video, put it on my computer on the home screen, and it said, if I disappear, please watch this.
Oh,
and I did.
You did one of those. I tried to mute myself and cough, but I muted the wrong channel, so I'm sorry.
Oh, you're fine. Don't worry about it. It was fine. So you're human. Okay,
so
good.
I'm human.
Good to know.
Yeah. I was like,
know.
I'm going to mute myself and cough. Oops, wrong channel. So you actually did like one of those rapture videos,
yeah.
kind of Now I grew up very similar with like a fundamentalist approach, but more in like the charismatic stream, like fundamentalist charismatic. And I did a kind of a solo episode last year about how like my former faith activated my nervous system without giving me any ways to like deactivate my nervous system.
Right.
Because like you have to be on guard all the time, and the rapture is about to happen. The Antichrist is about to emerge. The devil is a roaring lion about to pounce, and all of these things are like just about to like take you out, and you have to be like engaged and absolutely on the edge of your seat like all the time.
All the time.
And then we wonder like, why are we so like anxious? Why are we so depressed, and why is our nervous systems falling apart? And it's like, it's because like there's all of these spiritual practices that can actually like chill you out, but I was told they were dangerous. So
yeah,
it's like, oh, you can't trust meditation, you can't trust emotions, you can't trust silence,
you can't trust your heart.
Yeah,
you
none
can't
of that
trust
stuff.
any of it. And that's fear too. That's fear of yourself, fear of the world, fear of, literally the fear was crippling. And it was so intense. And yet here I was, on Christian radio, encouraging people, sharing the gospel. I was, speaking all over the place, and, of course, to women's groups and teenagers, because I guess they're okay to listen to women, but the men couldn't. I don't know. It was weird. And I was so into it. I was writing Bible studies and books, and I was a voice on a Christian meditation app. I was doing everything I could to make sure that I was telling as many people as possible that they didn't have to go to hell. And here's how you get to heaven. Because it wasn't about this life. You know what I mean, Tom? Like it was about the next life. Mm-hmm. And it was not about the journey. It was about the destination. And so in a way, you just kind of like grit your teeth and just put up with this world until you can get to the good stuff. This is just practice, and now get as many people as possible to go to heaven with you because it's all about that. And so I was I missed connection with other human beings because all of a sudden they were projects to be won. They were people that I needed to save. They weren't people that I could listen to and try to understand and honor. They were people that I needed to change. I needed to get them to believe and think like me, or they were going to hell. It wasn't, death and life is on the line. And I don't know how I didn't see how incredibly toxic that was to the way I was thinking, the way I was living. I see it so clearly now. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. But I was so in it, Tom, like 100%. And that's why it really, really, it breaks my heart when the one thing that people want to say to me is, you were never one of us. And I'm like, no, I really was. It's just hard for them to imagine that if it happened to me, could it happen to them? Because they're scared. And I get that.
Yeah. I don't know. So when is this moment where things really like shift for you and start to change, where it was more about destination and fear and trying to just dodge hell, and now it's about, the name of your book and your podcast is honoring the journey. So you pretty much like flip that over. It is about the journey, not the destination. So where, like, connect those two dots for us. How did you go from where you were to someone who is about the journey and honoring that?
Well, the first 4 years of like after I, really gave my whole entire life to the church, really, I would say I surrendered my life to Jesus, but I surrendered my life to the church. And when I did
that's
that,
a good distinction. That's a good distinction. Can you say that one more time? That was good.
Yeah, I would say, at the time that I was surrendering my life to Jesus. But in retrospect, I see that it was me surrendering my entire life to the church and to the mission of saving the world. And so the first year of that, I wrote a book, just a self-published book called Bodybuilders, where I feel like all the scripture I learned as a kid in my fundamental independent church, because we had to like memorize passages of scripture, it like fell from my head into my heart. And I had so much to say when it finally started to make sense. It was like, I assumed this is me getting the Holy Spirit. This is me. I'm truly a Christian. Here, look, I'm going to write a book. So I wrote a book. And then a year later, a year after my surrender, I wrote the book and I found myself on the morning show at the local Christian radio station. And as you know, so for years, I was this morning show voice, waking people up every morning and sharing my faith and my life with all of the Charlotte metro area. And then in 2007, so it was like, 3 or 4 years later, I was cast on Survivor China. And so I was a contestant on, it's a CBS reality show. I'm sure you've heard of it. Maybe you haven't seen it, but you've probably heard of it. And on that show, it was the first time since that full surrender to the church that I was out of my Christian bubble. And I was around people who believed different. I was around people who thought different. I was around people who I was literally going through one of the most traumatic experiences I've ever experienced with. And so we were very, very quickly bonded. Maybe it was a trauma bond. I don't know, but it was incredibly, I love these people. And one of the people who called me mom, a lot of the kids on the tribe called me mom. I was 38 at the time, so I wasn't that old, but he was a gay Mormon flight attendant. His name is Todd Herzog. And, he and I had some really deep conversations during the show. He ended up winning. So he won, $1 million at the age of 22. Wow. And kind of went buck wild and, started drinking alcohol and, found his way into addiction. And it was horrific seeing him go through this. And the conversations that we had through his years of addiction, I would just try to tell him, you've got to pick God, because I was always told, and I even taught that, if a homosexual chooses their lifestyle, and in spite of the fact that it's a sin, then they are choosing that as their God. They are not choosing God. And I would tell him that. And he would say, that just doesn't feel real to me, Leslie. I wish I could change. I don't. And he would just tell me these things. And so I started asking questions about it. And the people that I surrounded myself with back in my Christian bubble, were like, well, it's an abomination. God hates it. And so, so I started doing research about it. And I wasn't convinced that it was the sin that we were elevating it to be. I wasn't convinced that it was something that would keep people from having a relationship with God. And so I started reading books they told me not to read, from guys like Rob Bell. Yeah. They're like, don't read that book. I just started slowly asking questions. I had no idea that this was a thing called deconstruction. I was just trying to make sense of it all. And so that was like the first thread, I think. But then it was like, once you start to understand where, why the translation is the word homosexual and where that came from and what that actually meant in the original, Hebrew or Greek or whatever was, written initially, you start to go, well, if they could do it with this, maybe the Bible has some other things in there that I need to research. So I started researching the Bible. I started researching the history of the church and what they believed. I started looking at all the things that I was afraid of and researching them. Hell, where did that come from? And Satan. And so little by little, I was just kind of looking into reading books, reading church history, and realizing that the things that I was most afraid of weren't even part of the original church. They were more universalist. They didn't have this, hell where your skin melts off your body for the rest of eternity. It was so like translated. Everything was just so different than what I had been taught. And then 2016, and the whole Trump thing. And, that never sat well with me. So I stopped going to church in 2016. I was done. I was like, okay, so I've been lied to about this, this, and this. And now I'm being told that this is okay because he's got our agenda in mind, even though he's not done anything different than Bill Clinton, who they were ready to impeach. So I felt spiritually homeless. I felt politically homeless, and I was really alone. So in 2018, my husband and I moved from the Bible Belt to Utah. And so now we're minorities among this majority religion. The LDS faith is here. I don't know if you're aware of that, but they're everywhere. And it was just an interesting, while I'm already going through deconstruction, it helped me to dig a little deeper, because all of a sudden I'm hearing this religion that I was told is a cult, and you need to go show them who Jesus really is. They were praying for me because they were the true religion and they wanted me to understand. And so then I started doing research into other religions and realized, everybody thinks they're the one true way. And I was
No
like,
way.
wait a minute, Mark Twain said that, travel is fatal to prejudice. And I really, truly believe that with all of my heart, that when you come out of your bubble, and not with the intention of trying to change wherever it is that you land, because that's, a lot of people go on mission work where they're still in the bubble. They just take the bubble with them and try to bring people into it. I'm talking about like pop the bubble, get out, go listen to what other people believe, listen to what they're saying. All of a sudden you realize that religion is really just the language that people speak for their faith, which is personal. And when you're in a religion, the people in your religion actually speak the exact same language. So of course you're connected and you're bonded. But that doesn't mean that people who are in a different religion trying to connect with the divine are wrong. And I think for a long time I thought I'm the only one who knows anything right. I know all the answers. I could give an answer. I could apologetics you into the freaking ground. Like it was my job. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I could not connect with you as a human, because everything you said was already being processed in my mind as like, how can I rebuttal this? What am I going to say? And how can I quote a scripture? Because I know once I quote a scripture, they're not able to say anything back to me, because scripture is alive and it's gonna win the argument. Do you remember being taught that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like I debated people right out of the church. Like, I was like,
Yeah.
And then I was happy when they left, because they were not capitulating.
They were deceived.
They were
deceived by Satan.
Mm-hmm.
who was just after them, and after the church.
That bubble mentality, like, it's about maintaining like control over a smaller world, which is why they're so afraid of education and reading and travel and other people groups and other religions and other sexual orientations, and all that stuff is outside of the bubble, and they can't control that. And that's what makes it so scary. So that's why we have schools and Christian science and Christian philosophy and Christian worldviews and Christian this and Christian breath mints and Christian wrestling and Christian and
Christian radio.
Yes. It's just like, wow, we were so good at maintaining a bubble. Yeah. And I've been following this guy. His name is John Vervaeke. He's a kind of a cognitive scientist out of University of Toronto. And he grew up fundamentalist Baptist, and now he's more of a non-theist agnostic. And he's kind of like followed how the human brain has evolved and religion's role within it. And it's really interesting. He says that, we need a common mythology, and that gives us meaning, that gives us it gives us a place in the story. It gives us a role. It gives us vocabulary. And, he calls it like the arena that we get to play inside of. Right. And, we call that the bubble. But these mythologies that we've been embracing are contextualized from like a medieval and earlier kind of a Lord in the Tower kind of a thing. And I don't know if anyone's been paying attention, but a lot of things have developed in just the last 100 years. And now like faith is still in that medieval vocabulary understanding. And it's like things have changed so rapidly, and there's so much of it has changed that it's caused even more fear, doubling down. And I think the fundamentalist like response to, the 1920s Scopes monkey and the 60s sexual revolution, women's liberation, the civil rights from, the 40s and 50s, like the church has just been like retaliating and responding to things that try to permeate the bubble. And now
Right.
it's like, we're here again, like now we have Christian nationalists trying to reestablish themselves so that they can build the bubble again and we can live inside of it happily ever after.
Well, and force everyone else to live in that bubble
And
too.
yes, and then maintain control over everyone else because they want to make
Right.
it now not just the church thing, but now the government thing, which
It's
is
heartbreaking.
it's heartbreaking. And it's the secularization of the church into a politic. And
Right.
it's just really weird because you would have told like 13-year-old, 15-year-old, 18-year-old me that, I'd be like, that's heresy. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
But here we
Yeah. Some
are.
of the things I believe now, I'm like, whoo, Leslie, wow,
Yeah.
that you would not have believed this
Oh,
way.
yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
you would have been scared for you. And if someone told me that's the direction you're going, I probably would have jumped off a building, like, because I would have rather died than thought of myself as an apostate, which is what the church looks at me as now. And the
Yeah.
funny thing is I never stopped following Jesus ever. I literally, when I first left the church, my intention was, I'm going to go and I'm going to go search for these answers and I'm going to find them. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to be in the pew and I'm going to help people understand from a broader perspective, right? But the problem is when I came out, it was like I stepped out of the boat of Christianity, of evangelical white American Christianity. I stepped out of the boat to go spend time with Jesus by myself. And then when I turned around and thought, okay, Jesus, it's time to get back in the boat, he's like, no, we're not getting back in there. It's sinking. And literally holes all over this boat. And then you look around and you see so many people who have left the boat who are drowning because they're not keeping their eyes on Christ. They're not interested in anything that has to do with spirituality anymore because they have been so traumatized. And like, I think that vision of that is why I do what I do now. And I took it to heart. I really did. As somebody, like I said, who spoke and spoke and spoke and apologetics and told everybody what they had to believe for so long, all of a sudden, for 5 years, maybe even 6, I just got really, really quiet. And I listened. I listened to podcasts and I read books and I did research and I really thought through these things because I didn't want to say anything until I knew how I felt, and I was confident in how I felt. And because I knew that I had a voice, and there, when you have a voice, it's good, but it's also really scary because you don't want to lead people the wrong way. And, so you just kind of, I called myself an invisible. I was online and I would see things that I loved what they were saying, but I wouldn't like it because I didn't want people to see that I liked it. I would listen to podcasts, but I would never leave a review because I didn't want people to see that I had listened. I was very careful about doing this by myself because for the first time in my life, I was learning to think critically, learning to think for myself, learning to trust myself, gaining autonomy that I had completely lost in religion, and just finding my path, and then when I finally started speaking out about it, my thoughts were clear because I was quiet for so long and I listened and I learned. And I took note of how lonely it was and how difficult it was. And I knew that when I finally started sharing, I was going to help other people because I knew that if it could happen to me, it's going to, and it's already happened to a lot of people that are feeling like, I don't know where I fit in this church anymore. This doesn't look like love. I don't know what to do. And I know that people are going to leave, and I needed to, it's so hard. And you know this, Tom, because you're one of the voices right now in this, deconstruction community. Once you make that choice to be vocal about where you stand, you start to realize who your true friends really are. And you start to realize who only likes you for what you believe. And not just friends, but family, like people that you respected. Even my mentor, for 20 years, I've not heard from her at all. And, should I reach out to her? Maybe, I don't know. But I feel like I'm trying to be tender. Because I know how scared they are. I know that they're terrified for me, and they're terrified for anybody who might, quote, follow me, which is hilarious because I'm like, Don't follow me. I don't want to be followed. I want to walk with you. I don't need you to believe the way I believe. I don't need you to come to the conclusions that I've come to. This is my journey, and I'm honoring my journey, but I'm also here to honor yours. And that's so different. They can't even understand. Like, they're like, no, you're recruiting people. I'm like, no, I seriously am not. I'm just trying to let people know that they're not alone as they walk through this incredibly difficult and lonely time of life.
Yeah. And I was like you, I was very quiet, invisible, and like learning and being quiet about a lot of the stuff. And then when I started to get a little more courage to speak, like, I think I kind of like get it, like I started this podcast back in 2015, right after I got my doctorate degree. And then it lasted 6 months and it ended. And then it just kind of like, and then it was like, I need to do this. But I just kept thinking like, I'm not ready because I haven't really figured things out yet. And then I finally just said, I'm just going to start, and it's really going to suck for a while. It won't be great, but I'll just learn how to do it, and I'll start to learn in public and be wrong in public and correct myself in public. And that was really scary because I thought I had to be 100% right before I said anything. Yeah. And then I was like, well, I'm never going to say anything because I'm never going to get to the 100% right, because even the things that I thought I knew, like I was like, oh yeah, I've changed my mind so many times. But when you do start speaking, like the people who were projecting onto you what they expected you to be and what they wanted you to be, and then you're mirroring back something totally different to them, then they're like, you're not who I thought. You're not you're not wearing the red hat. Why aren't you wearing a red hat? Like, I put my Facebook profile pic to black, Wednesday morning when I woke up and saw the results of the election. And still another person just quoted like, really? And then a whole bunch of people were like, yes, really, after that. But someone again was just like, I was projecting onto you who I thought you were. And I wasn't correcting that image for so long. I just let people think whatever they needed to about me. But
same.
It's like, I'm tired of that. It's really like,
it's exhausting.
It is more exhausting than I thought it would be. Being a 9 on the Enneagram, I'm more of like the peacemaker, peacekeeper kind of a thing. And it's just like, they don't need to know where I stand. I'll just kind of, help them out. And I was real like passive about that. And now I'm just like saying things a little bit more blatant online. And boy, the response has been the opposite of what I thought it was going to be. The response was like, finally someone said it. Finally, you're like, that. I don't think I would have got the same response 5 years ago, but I think now it's, it's just, that journey was really hard to get to the place where I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to say it.
Yeah.
I don't believe in hell anymore. There you go.
Boom. I dropped the bomb. Well, and yeah, I would say, honestly, it's more positive than it was negative, but the negative was so painful and so hurtful. And like some of the things that they say, like I had a woman who hired me once. And when I say hired, I mean, I hold that word very loosely because you don't get a lot of money doing anything as a woman in ministry. But she had me come speak at her event one time. And she sent me a message and said, were you lying to us? Is this who you really were the whole time? And I was like, no, I was 100% it. Are you kidding me? She's like, well, it doesn't make sense because if you really were a Christian, you wouldn't turn your back. And I'm like, I'm not turning my back. The only thing I'm turning my back on is some toxic theology. I am not turning my back on my Christianity. I'm definitely turning my back on Christian nationalism. That is not for me. And, it's not lost on me that when the church or when religion and politics get into bed together, really terrible things happen. As a matter of fact, the death of Christ is a completely perfect example of what happens when that happens. And so I'm not ashamed to say that. Am I a Pollyanna? That's what I hear a lot. Oh, you're such a Pollyanna. You're all just preaching love all the time. And that's so toxic. And I'm like, is it? Because the Bible says that God is love. And if if that's true, if love is, if you can love too much, if I get to heaven and God says, Leslie, you loved way too much, so I'm going to have to send you to hell, I will take my fate, because that does not sound at all like the God that I've been able to get to know now that I've gotten out from underneath of the toxic theology that I was being taught. Because God is so much more than the, like, and people say, are you an atheist? Well, kinda. I'm an atheist to the God that I was taught about. I am not an atheist. I see God so different now, and I'm not afraid of God anymore. And then, you get that whole, fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not what that word means. When you really look at it, it's like, no, that's reverence and respect and, a heart of like just unbelievable compassion and love towards somebody who loves you fiercely. That to me is what that word means. And so I'm sad for people that think that they have to be afraid all the time. That's just not, it's not, I don't know. Like, to me, it's like, why do we put people in jail for abusing their kids if we're going to say that's how God is?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it different when he does it? Like, because it's abusive. Think about it. If hell is a place and he's sending people there because they believe differently than they should, or that he was hoping that they would, for one thing, that tells me that God is very insecure and needs us to agree 100% with him all the time, or her. But for another thing, I just feel like it negates the whole idea of what discipline is. Discipline is the goal of discipline is to rehabilitate somebody's behavior so that they can change and be better. And that's the kind of discipline that God gives, right? But hell, there's no reprieve. It's a constant just torment for all of eternity, and there's no way out. None. Does that sound like a God that loves you? Does that sound like a God whose whole heart is to bring his children together and to love them? I don't know. Doesn't sound like it to me.
No. And I can get really like super nerdy on stuff sometimes. And I was listening to this professor from the University of Virginia. He's studying like near-death experiences and compiling databases of people who have had like near that whole like tunnel going to see the light kind of near-death experience. And I was just kind of listening along because I'm really curious. I think, like, side note, like, I think when we start saying our religion communicates the whole metaphysic of the universe, we're like that's where we get it wrong. It's like, no, our religion points to the mystery that we'll never see until we get there on the other side. Like, it's not. So anyways, I'm really curious about that kind of stuff. And I nerd out about it. And he said something that just, I had to pause it and just sit with it for a minute. He says, out of all of the cases, there are individuals that have unpleasant experiences. And he said, most of the unpleasant experiences are identical to the people who what they're describing, but they're just not enjoying it. They're going down the tunnel and they're like, no, I don't want to be here. I hate this. This is awful. Or they're in the presence of, ultimate love. And they're like, wait, I can't manipulate this. I can't hide from this. And so they're not experiencing it there. He says, but then even a more minority, they describe some kind of a hell experience that you would hear. He says, but the only people who ever have those are the fundamentalists who were indoctrinated with that way of understanding. He says every other religion, atheist, agnostic, everybody else, he says he's never encountered anyone who's had a near-death experience that was like some kind of a hellish experience that wasn't a fundamentalist already.
That makes sense.
And that just like blew me away. I'm just like, wow. If I could give that info to like 18-year-old me, I think that might help.
Bless her heart. Yeah.
I still would have wrote it off, but I mean, come on.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. I would have said this person is definitely going to hell. I wouldn't have listened. And that's the whole thing. A lot of people are like, I'm deconstructing, especially a lot of the people I work with as clients. I do coaching now. I help people through life transitions, faith transitions. And a lot of them are like, they really struggle with, should I say something? Should I be vocal? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, you don't have to do anything. I think we're taught so much in evangelical white Christianity that we have got to share the gospel. We have to let everybody know where we stand because their lives are in danger if they don't know the truth, quote unquote. So that is so baked into us that we think now we have to be these evangelists for unbelief or for, deconstruction or whatever. And the truth is you don't have to do anything. This is your walk. This is your journey. What does it look like to honor that? People who are supposed to speak out will speak out. People who aren't, won't. It's not a big deal. But it is so hard because we are so convinced this has to be my life mission now because everything was fully surrendered to this other message that now we realize was a little bit toxic. And then we're coming out of it. And now we're like, okay, now I have this new message. Now I have to tell everybody this.
Yeah.
You don't have to do anything you're not ready to do. And they don't tell you that when you're in evangelicalism. It is, you have to because this is your job. The only reason you're still here and God didn't zap you up to heaven the second you were saved is so you could let people know. And it becomes your life's mission. And it's very difficult in deconstruction to realize, oh gosh, well, who am I now then? If I'm not an evangelist, if I'm not here to show people who God really is and tell them the truth of who he is, then who am I? And it's very hard to find that because you've lost your autonomy. You don't trust your heart. You think you're wicked, And so coaching people through, helping them understand, you're not wicked. You are loved by God just as you are. You are not this disgusting human being. I mean, can we just now that you think about it outside of religion, the whole message that you are nothing. You are disgusting to God. He won't even look at you. But if you say a prayer, then Jesus will cover you. And when he sees you, he'll see Jesus and then you're accepted. And that was such a beautiful message to me at the time. And now I'm like, no wonder I've struggled with self-esteem. No wonder I'm such an insecure person and I have to go to therapy now. You know what I mean? Because I literally was taught and believed with all of my heart that as a human being, I was gross and disgusting and unlovable. And the only thing that made me lovable was Jesus. That's it. That's so twisted.
That's like an abusive parent.
Yes.
And then someone coming in and appeasing the abusive parent on your behalf.
Right.
And it doesn't change the fact that that's an abusive parent.
Right.
That's that whole thing. It's almost like we've taken that whole patriarchal authoritarian structure and then just superimposed it as a divine thing to give us permission to keep doing it.
Exactly. Yeah, I saw, oh my goodness, I think it was The Naked Pastor or somebody, I don't remember who did it, but did a cartoon the other day and I was like, dang, that is good. And it was like God saying, I created you, and man looking at God saying, no, I created you.
Ooh.
And I was like, ooh, that is good. And it's true. I think we create what makes us feel safe. And so when somebody comes along and they have a different message than the one that makes you feel grounded, gives you purpose, gives you meaning, makes you feel like you have all the answers. It gives you assurance for the future. When somebody comes along and has a different message than that, it can really aggravate you because you're feeling this pull and you're like, don't you pull away my truth. This is my truth. This is the truth. This is it. And so when you say that, it makes me feel like you're pulling me away. And people can get really downright angry and mean and ugly. Oh, yeah. And we see it every day.
Yeah. And then vote for
but I understand it.
Like we did.
I understand it. I mean, I would have done the same thing. So
yeah,
it's hard for me to be angry with them, which is funny. I think I went through an anger phase. It was awful. But where I'm at now, it's just compassion. I'm like, of course you feel that way. You are feeling so scared. Because if you stop believing like I did, you're afraid you're going to go to hell. You're afraid this is, your life won't have any meaning. You'll be floating through the world with no purpose, and I literally did believe, okay, Leslie, if you do this, you're going to lose your gifts. God's going to take them away. You're not going to be able to speak anymore. You're not going to be able to do radio. He will take away your gifts if you're not using it for, quote, his glory, right? But I will tell you something, Tom, that did not happen. The fear of it happening was crippling, but it didn't happen. I now have a podcast called Honoring the Journey where we talk about everybody's life journey, what it looks like, why they, some of them deconstructed, some of them haven't. But like, hey, let's listen to this person's journey and honor it. What can we learn from this person? My voice is still being used to encourage people. My gifts are still being used to help people down a pretty dark and difficult path. So the only thing that changed is that I'm not afraid anymore. That's the only thing that changed.
Yeah. That whole fear, like, it drives the core identity of an evangelical, of the need to convince and convert. Like, that's the thing. And about 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago now, like, I totally dropped it. And it was like, it all just happened at once. I started taking like this meditation course, and I was going through, I think I was on like a year into the meditation course, and it's supposed to do work without needing to talk about doing the work. It just kind of happens. And then you change, and then all of a sudden you're aware of the change. And the awareness of that change can feel like, they call it like a emotional disruption. And so I just got hired at this church that I'm at now, and I'm driving here, and that it hit me in that moment on the way in. And I pull in the driveway, I park, very first office day. And I called up my wife and I said, I can't do this job. I'm not a Christian anymore. And then she's like, well, like, let's talk about like what's going on. And I said, I just have absolutely zero need, desire to convert or convince anyone of anything at all. And I don't know how to be a pastor except to do those two things. And like she talked me, she's like, just stick with it. That's not the core of your faith. And I stuck with it. And now all of a sudden I'm like, there is so much work to do. There's like, I was just entertaining myself with, converting and convincing and just giving myself assurances that I was doing a good job on that. But when you actually look at like the community neighborhood work that can be done, it's like, I don't have time to even convert and convince anybody. There's so much work to do in the neighborhood. I ended up partnering with the funeral homes, and now I do like 30 to 40 funerals a year for people who don't have a church home or a spiritual home at all.
What a gift. What a gift you're giving the world, Tom. That's amazing.
And it all comes from what you're talking about. Like, I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not afraid for other people. I'm not afraid for me. There's no need to convert and convince anybody. And my entire job as a pastor for, 15 years at that point was that one thing. And then I didn't even know how to be on the other side of that. But now, almost 6 years in to being a pastor here, it's like, it's so freeing to just let people be themselves, to meet them where they are. We maintain a benevolent fund here, and it's like someone will come and they'll be like, oh, I'll be at church on Sunday. And I'm like, you don't have to. We're just trying to help.
We're here if you want. There's like, no pressure.
It's
and
great.
That's it's hard to feel no pressure. Like, you're not like, it feels weird not to carry a bunch of heavy burdens when you leave religion.
Yeah.
And you're in a church, but you're not in a toxic religion. You know what I mean? Like, and there are churches that are not toxic. There are people who do what you do, who allow for people to experience their own journey and don't feel like you have to come on my path. Don't go down your path. Your path is dangerous. You know
what makes a big difference is our church is not creedal. It's covenantal.
Oh, nice.
We have 7 sentences, and then you, in your own conscience, have the freedom to interpret those through the Holy Spirit that dwells in you.
Wow.
I was
freedom.
Like,
that's the freedom.
That's a thing? And when I got here, I was like, that is a thing. Like, there's someone over there who doesn't believe in the Trinity, and they are still here. They're allowed to come here, and I don't have to try and convert or convince them that there is a Trinity. It's like, that's not my job. We have
that's
just
the freedom
7.
that Jesus talked about. That
Yeah,
is the,
it's so good.
being able to just love people right where they are. And you don't have to do, when he talked about his burden is light, that's what he meant. Like if you live your life just knowing that you're connected to God, knowing that the divine is in you, and that, and you walk in kindness. We have choices every day to walk in kindness or to walk not in kindness, or, we have these choices, but when you choose to love and you live your life like Jesus, yeah, maybe the government and the church institutions in general, are not going to be thrilled with you. That's okay. The truth is, the freedom that I feel now, I wouldn't trade it for anything, because I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of people. I have compassion for people. I want people to be free, but I don't need their journey to look like mine in order for them to experience that freedom. And I think that that's what's so important. I think, I remember being taught in evangelicalism that there is no such thing as, quote, my truth, that it's the truth or it's nothing, or it's a lie.
Yeah.
But, there is a such thing as my truth. What's true for me isn't always true for people around me. And that's okay. Like, there's nothing to be afraid of. I think, to me, I'm such a simple woman, and I say that with all respect to myself. I'm a simple woman, and I just lean into love. So the decisions that I make, I always ask myself, is this a loving thing to do? Is this the kind thing to do? And if you make your decisions like that, all of a sudden you realize it's really not that difficult, But the thing that didn't make sense to me is when I was in evangelicalism, a lot of the things that I was doing did not feel like love. They felt like judgment. They felt like it, even though I would call it good news, it felt like terrible news, And so like now I don't have that dread, that feeling of dread that I felt like I had to carry around with me all the time, where I was like, I hate that this is the truth, but it is, so I have to speak it. I don't feel that anymore.
Yeah. There's I'm having a hard time remembering the pastor, but he said this is what our quote unquote good news sounds like to somebody outside of our bubble. And he says, just imagine I go up to you and I say, you owe Knuckles about $1 million, and he's coming for you. That's the bad news. And then the person's like, oh my gosh, who's Knuckles and why do I owe him $1 million? He's like, but wait, there's good news also. This guy over here kind of paid off your debt, so you're good as long as you sign this piece of paper. It's like, that's what it sounds like to people outside the bubble. And it's just
transactional.
When you look at it that way, it's just like, why did I ever sign on to that other than the fact that I was indoctrinated into it and immersed in it and drowned in it?
Well, and fear. And fear, not only does it make you keep believing, it makes it so you don't want to stop believing, because what if it's true? And, I stopped asking myself, what if it's true? And said, what if it's not? What would that look like? What would it look like to walk in, not have to change everyone around me, but to just love them right where they are? What would that look like? Oh, and let me tell you, it looks great. And it feels great. And it's, to me, I feel like the message of Christ it's so much simpler than a transactional, hey, say a prayer and ask me in your heart so that God can look at you and see me and then you're good. It was so much more than that. It was, hey guys, the kingdom of God is already here and it's in you. And when you believe that and you walk in love and when you live your life like me, you will experience the kingdom of God here and now. It's not about when you die. We've made the kingdom of God into heaven. That's what we think. We think we're trying to be saved. We're trying to be free from hell. We're trying to be saved from hell. And it's like, Jesus is like, no, I'm just trying to save you from yourselves. I'm trying to save you from your ego and from that Satan spirit that wants to, we all have. I mean, we do. I've realized, I had a thought once, and whether or not it's true, I don't know, but it makes me feel better. And I will just preface it that way. But I feel like Satan is this, we've made it into this other entity who's fighting for our soul the way God is, you know. But the truth is, I really believe Satan is that part of all of us that is bent towards evil. And I think as a human being, we all have it. And I believe when Jesus was being tempted in the wilderness, he wasn't sitting there with another being having a conversation. He was confronting the humanity of himself. And he was fighting evil within himself, that he knew how to fight with truth. And when I think of it that way, I lose fear of Satan because I know I have control over Satan. Whereas when Satan is this unpredictable, scary entity that's outside of me trying to, you know, pull one arm while God's pulling the other and I'm about to split in two, you know, like instead of thinking of it that way and personifying it, which by the way, it does relieve you of a lot of personal responsibility when you believe that, because the devil made me do it, or it wasn't me, it was all God. You know, there's no personal responsibility, you know, when you're deep in the theology that I was in. It was all either God did it through me and that's why I was amazing, or Satan tempted me and it was his fault because he's this deceiver and a roaring lion trying to get me. But what if I looked at it like, okay, Leslie, you just made a choice and it was a bad one, and now you need to make it right, and now you're going to have consequences. You know, that puts it on me. And we've been putting the blame on everything else for so long. And, you know, I don't know. To me, that just, it helps me feel less intimidated and less afraid when I say, no, it's who we are as human beings. We have the propensity towards incredible good, but we also have the propensity, and we see it every day, to incredible evil. And when we take responsibility for that, and when we realize that we have control over that, and we can make choices that line up more like Christ, that's what he means when he says, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. No one gets to the Father except through me. That doesn't mean you don't get to heaven except through me. That means you don't get to experience what it's like to truly be connected to God unless you make the decisions that lean into love.
I like
That's
that.
just, whether it's true or not, I don't know, Tom. But and here's the thing: it makes my heart feel safe to believe that, and it lines up with Scripture.
I think the individual is a big piece of it. And then I think then comes the collective zeitgeist spirit of the age of all of the individuals then contribute the little bit of darkness. If they surrender into the darkness, then they contribute that into the spirit of the age. And then it becomes bigger than me, but also me. So it's like, yes, Donald Trump, MAGA is me.
Yeah.
But not
But
just
it's bigger.
me. It's
Right.
it's the spirit of the age that
Collective.
is kind of encompassing a whole group of people. And like, I just talked with Bradley Jerzak a couple of weeks ago, and he said, less than a person, more than a force. He wouldn't give me like a solid answer. I was like, who is Satan? I don't know. He's an Orthodox, and I have never talked to an Orthodox theologian before. And he's like, I loved his answers. They were great, but they were so different than how me as an evangelical person would have understood that 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And
Well, Jesus said, where two or three are gathered in my name, I am there among them. So if there's a Christ spirit, maybe there's a Satan spirit. You know, maybe there's, you know, when two or three are gathered in the name of fear, in the name of evil. Yeah. I mean, it could almost feel like it would get bigger and scarier when you've got more and more in a collective sort of force trying to push an agenda that doesn't necessarily keep in mind the welfare of all humans and human flourishing, but instead is more focused on this is what we want. And we do it every day. I'm not saying I'm doing it right now. You know what I mean? But but hopefully I'm leaning into love in the way I'm doing it. I hope.
Yeah. Yeah. And just trying to explain that to somebody who just has that polarity of heaven and hell, and it's like they can't accept it because you just told me I'm going to hell. It's like,
right.
Oh, I don't believe in that. So no, I didn't say that. But when you say you're being influenced by this, you know, evil or the spirit of the age or the Satan or whatever you want to call it, And they're like, oh, you're calling me possessed. You're calling me saying I'm going to hell. You're saying they jump into their polarity, and it's really hard to communicate any of those theologies to people in that,
You're so
that
right.
dichotomy.
You're so right. And I wonder too, if maybe this, Rob Bell says this all the time. You can't take somebody someplace they're not ready to go. You can't do it. If they're not in a place where they're going to believe it, you're wasting your breath trying to convince them. So all you can do is show them in love. The way 1 Peter 3 talked about how women, can win their husbands over by the reverence of their lives or whatever. I don't know what that was referring to, but that makes sense to me. If you're trying to convince somebody to believe something with your words, that does nothing except piss them off, right? But if you show somebody, this is what it means to walk in love. This is what it looks like to make a decision that is good for the flourishing of all humans. This is what this looks like. Perhaps that could start a movement of good. Yeah. And I'm hoping that's what we're getting ready to do. I feel it, Tom. Do you feel this?
I'm trying to really hard. Yeah. It's been a dark week, but I'm trying to. Yeah. And I trust we're going to get somewhere. I've got my eyes on some people that I'm hoping going to bring some change. So I'm just like, I'm trying to pull out the little threads of hope, and it's like, I'll just hang on to this little thing right here, right now. Because I know we're in for a very difficult 4 years. And, I'm hoping we're so sick of it in 4 years that we're ready for something good. That's what I'm hoping for.
That could happen. And he can't run again. So,
cross all fingers, knock on all woods.
Well, I saw something the other day and I laughed. It said, well, if Trump actually won the last election, wouldn't he not be eligible for this one? Like, if he really thinks he won last time, he should not be eligible. But I don't know. We'll be okay. I think the one thing I always, maybe I'm just this eternal Pollyanna optimist, I don't know, but I just really believe sometimes it's the darkest times when we see the most, or, stars, where we see people starting to shine their light, and we start to understand that it just can't continue. And, and there's always hope. I just believe that there has to be.
Yeah.
Otherwise, why are we here?
Yeah. Yeah. All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. For there is a force of love moving through the universe that holds us fast and will never let us go. We say that at church every Sunday.
I love that. That's beautiful.
As Jillian
we should say that every morning. Just a reminder,
Yeah.
It's not a trite, like, God is still on the throne. It's a real,
I just
declaration.
Posted about that.
Did you really?
I just did. That was my very first post, was how that was a form of spiritual bypassing.
It totally is. Yeah.
That was fun. My first words after the election is, stop saying that. Well,
please.
How would you name this podcast episode if you were the host of the Liminal Living Show and you had this conversation with you? What would you name this one? Because we've went so many interesting places that I'm thinking to myself here is like, I don't know what to call this one, because we've just had a really good conversation. I didn't even ask a single one of my questions. Yeah. And it was just a really good conversation. So how would you name this one?
I mean, I keep coming back to it. It's my podcast. It's my book. We're honoring our journeys. We're just honoring the journeys that we've been on. And I'm just trying to understand that, like one of the things I say in my book is, they called me Sister Christian on Survivor. And so I was known as Sister Christian for many, many years. And like you said, it was really hard to come out of people seeing that as who I am. And I'd let them believe that for a long time until I finally just couldn't be dualistic anymore. I had to be authentically who I am. I don't function well when I'm trying to be dualistic. So Sister Christian, I used to be angry with her. I used to be mad because she was gullible. She taught things that, put burdens on people. She thought she was right all the time. She really didn't listen. But her heart was right. She really thought she was doing the right thing. Everything I did, Tom, in those years, I was leaning into love the way I knew how to love. And so the way that I honor my journey is by looking at Sister Christian and say, instead of stomping on her grave, I take her flowers and I say, thank you for teaching me what it's like to give your heart 100% to something. Thank you for teaching me that community is important. Thank you for teaching me that other humans are worth whatever, however you got to fight for them. Because I really thought that's what I was doing, but she's gone, Sister Christian is gone, but I honor her. And now when I speak out, I'm still honoring her. Because if I hadn't been that person for so long, I couldn't be this person. It's all part of the journey. And rather than negating anything I've been through or wishing it never happened, I'm like, no, but it did. And it meant something. And now it's almost like I can speak two languages, I speak Christianese and I speak, the language I have today. So it's like so I understand on a deeper level why it's hard for people to hear what I'm saying. I don't get upset. I try not to take it personal. They're not upset with me. They're upset because something in them is going, what if she's right? And then they're mad at themselves for thinking that. And I remember because that was me. And I remember thinking, I wish they were right. I wish that was true because that would make everything so much easier. And then I realized if Jesus said that his burden is light, maybe it is true that I don't have to carry all of this fear and shame and, inability to connect with other human beings. So now I would say honoring the journey. We're just doing that. And that looks different for both of us, Tom. It's kind of cool.
Gosh, well, I think those are great words to close us out. That was a perfect way. So thank you for being here and sharing your journey and honoring our journeys, me and my listeners. And where would you like to send people to connect with your work, buy your book?
Yeah. Well, I do have a book out now called Honoring the Journey, and it's a Kindle, also, paperback. And then we also have a Audible version that I get to read, which is kind of cool because I'm like redeeming my voice from, the years of Christian radio. So that's available and you can find that on Amazon. And then I also have a coaching business. I do one-on-one, life transition, faith transition coaching. And you can find out more about that at leslieneasecoaching.com. And I have a podcast called Honoring the Journey. And I think I'm on, at this point, episode 47 or 48. And you will hear journeys. Like every journey that I hear, I learn from. And every journey that I hear, it's like they're taking me down their path and I'm picking flowers, and I'm like, so I can remember. And then I get back on my path and my path is so much more beautiful now because I've been able to enjoy this other path. Whereas before it was all about getting to the top of that mountain. And those are the flowers I leave on the grave of Sister Christian. So that's where you can find me.
All right. Well, I will put those links down in the show notes so people can just click on them and head on over there. So thank you, Leslie, for being here on the show. It's been just such a great conversation.
Well, Tom, thank you for having me, and I honor your journey.